Hello and welcome to Murder Dictionary Podcast. That's Courtney and I'm Brianna.
Hello.
Hey there. Welcome.
Welcome to the Thunderdome.
Is that what this is? It sometimes feels like it when we go through these cases where it's like an emotional Thunderdome. Tonight is no exception.
Absolutely not an exception.
Before we get into the last letter case that we have for letter L, let's talk about what's in our description and show notes.
Perfect.
So you'll find links to our social media if you want to follow us over there. You'll also find links to resources that we use to research our cases if you ever want to do more reading. And you'll find links to some mental health resources, anti-bullying stuff, suicide hotlines, all that kind of stuff in case you need those resources as well. And lastly, you will find links to our thread list if you want to get merch like t-shirts and phone cases, bath towels, if you want us to take over your entire life via merch.
It is Christmas time.
Gifts, it's the season. So also, we have a link to our Patreon where we have bonus episodes, extra content. I try and do early release episodes whenever possible and ad-free episodes. So if you want access to those, head over to patreon.com/murderdictionarypodcast. And we want to thank the new people that have joined our Patreon this week. So thank you very much to Tatiana, Christy, and Zoe for joining our Patreon.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. We really appreciate you. So I think that's pretty much it. We can dive into our case for this week.
Let's do it.
So this episode, we are talking about William Edward Hickman, who was born on February 1st, 1908 in Sebastian County, Arkansas. He was the fourth of 5 kids born to William Thomas and Eva Hickman. His father deserted the family and left to Texas when William was only 6, at which point his mom moved the whole family to Kansas City. And at that point, William actually began going by the name Edward sometimes, because once his dad left, his dad was William Thomas, and he hated his dad for leaving. So he decided to kind of leave his dad's name behind and go by Edward.
There was only one other mention of him ever seeing his dad really again, aside from later. And it was like 1926, like a year before this had happened. But that was it.
A teacher described William as a, quote, nice but peculiar boy. Doesn't bode well for him.
No.
William actually liked to play pranks on his classmates, but his teacher recalls that he would become extremely emotional when he was confronted or scolded about the pranks he'd play.
He could dish it out, but he couldn't take it.
Yeah, I think he was just bad with accountability. He was used to being a golden child or something.
Yeah, he would just start crying when he got caught.
Exactly. As a child, William reportedly used to catch, torture, and kill the dogs and cats around the neighborhood. At 11 years old, William committed his first crime, which was actually stealing candy from a shop. But other than this, he really stayed out of trouble through his entire teens. And in fact, his record was squeaky clean when he was young.
I mean, even like we're stealing candy. Okay. Like this is kid shit, right?
Right.
I mean, you can steal candy. It's not that
big of a deal.
Yeah, exactly. You can steal candy and then never do it again.
Most people can.
Most people.
Not William.
No.
So in school, he was really popular. He was a great student, and he was actually the president of 3 different honor societies and also vice president of his class in his senior year of high school.
It's impressive.
I mean, really, that's why I'm saying, other than just stealing candy once, I mean, he was really doing well in school, social life, all areas. He was also heavily involved in all his extracurricular activities like debate team, and he was the yearbook editor.
Something to be said for being busy. You stay busy, right?
Idle hands.
Idle hands are the devil's plaything, correct?
Yes.
Great movie, too. For real.
Was that the Devon Sawa one?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We've got to.
Watch party after this.
Yeah, no, my brain is like moving so quickly right now. How did I not remember Idle Hands for like Halloween? Why have I not? What am I doing here?
Next year, we'll just cosplay that for our costumes.
Done. I'll be the hands.
One of the biggest disappointments in William's youth was when he came in second place at a national debate competition.
What a loser.
And it was a huge catastrophic thing for him. I mean, he was furious and just could not cope with this first huge failure because he had previously had such a stellar academic career.
So much pressure, you know?
It was second place. It wasn't that big of a deal, but we all know that kid in school, right?
Yes.
That gets like an A- and completely loses their shit.
Yeah.
Like, I remember that person.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to call him out here, but I remember, you know?
I knew that person because I wasn't that person, but I knew them.
So he was that person. And I think for him, he does have a sense of entitlement. He does have a sense of ego, but this was a turning point where he just lost it because he was second. It just didn't seem possible to him that that could happen. And this really seemed like an emotional turning point, and he became just obsessed with winning the next national competition. But when he went, he lost again.
This is like Shane failing the bar exam.
Oh, man.
Over and over. Going to hotels for weeks to study and you just fail.
He was obsessed. I mean, it was like an addiction that he had to win this competition or something.
Yep.
And yeah, it just rocked his world that he could not win. After graduating, he took a few odd jobs and then he enrolled in junior college. But he actually only made it 9 days before leaving school.
Weird.
Very strange. And again, it's like there's this turning point with the debate thing. Because he had previously been doing so well, all of a sudden he just can't keep it together.
So weird.
Vice president of his class, you know, honor society, everything. When he was 19 years old, William was at the library when he met his future criminal partner, a 16-year-old named Welby Hunt. Once the two of them paired up, they began dabbling in forgery, armed robbery, and eventually murder.
So weird how he was none of this. And then he just meets this kid who's like a literal kid. He's 16. And now we're off and running.
Yeah. And it's worth pointing out a 16-year-old in an old-timey case is different than a 16-year-old today.
It's like 35 chain smoking.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I
mean, he's like on the street, you know, hustling, selling cigarettes or whatever he's doing, you know, I'm sure he's that kind of kid.
And that makes William just like his mentor elder.
Probably
19.
Because he had been so entrenched in his books, I'm kind of assuming that 16-year-old Welby was a little bit more street smart and savvy and, you know, quote, worldly, aka criminal than he was.
I agree.
So yeah, it was perfect at this point for his turn into something a little bit darker. Welby would later say that William told him, quote, "It was his wish to get someone and chop them up in little pieces and throw them along the highway." So I think he did have this dark streak in him, but I don't know when that was said. So if that was an escalation or if it was like day one, hey, we're in the library, let me tell you about my dreams, you know?
I want it to be in the library.
I don't.
I do. Because
That's terrifying.
To me none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something that he was so like distracted in a good way that he couldn't even, maybe he just kept it under wraps. I can't do everything. I can't be a criminal mastermind and valedictorian.
That's true. I mean, he was, of course, like we said, you know, hurting animals and stuff. So, I mean, maybe it was just a matter of keeping busy and staying out of trouble, but he had that inside him. I mean, on some level, he kind of has to eventually go on to murder.
Well, he's been a man since he was like 6 years old, right? Back in old timey.
He was the man of the house.
So now that he's graduated high school, I wonder if money now is a real concern. Before, maybe in school, it still wasn't, but now it is. And now it's like, well, now I need money. And when I was 11, I stole and it was chill. So now here's Welby. Let's do this.
When I go through old-timey cases, there's this feeling to me of desperation.
That's exact. And the time period is just Depression era.
Exactly. I mean, he's doing what he's got to do to make it. But a lot of people could do the same thing and not murder people.
Well, sure.
So I don't know. It's just like he made his choices. Soon after they began working together, they decided to leave Kansas City and head to Los Angeles in December of 1926. William told his mother that he was going to LA to become a movie star. And throughout his life, it seems like it's fair to say he was slightly obsessed with movies and Hollywood as well.
We're so jaded being in LA. Like, you're just like, oh, yeah, this guy. Okay, I know him.
Right. We know millions of those people. They all moved here. And he was one. He just thought that he could make it. Once they got to LA, they stayed with Welby's grandparents in Alhambra, and their criminal careers began to escalate. On Christmas Eve, 1926, the duo robbed the C. Ivy Tom's drugstore in Rose Hill neighborhood. When officers attempted to apprehend them, a shootout erupted, and William shot a police officer named DJ Oliver in the stomach. The pharmacist, Clarence Ivy Thomas, who I'm assuming is also the owner, because the pharmacy is named after him, was also hit and died of his gunshot wounds. They escaped the shootout without being apprehended and managed to keep a low profile in the city and evade capture.
This is not a big area either. Like, for people not from Los Angeles, not a big area. And at the time, too, it's like there's not really traffic lights to slow you down. You can get from one place to the other probably very quickly. It is so bizarre that they're like, we'll just lay low.
Oh, yeah.
And no one's going to find us. And we shot a cop in the stomach, and he probably knows just what we look like.
And Alhambra, as far as LA is concerned, is kind of a small town, especially during that time. I would assume it was tiny. So, yeah, I don't know. I think everybody would probably know them as the new kids in town staying with Welby's family. So, yeah, they just laid low, but I guess nobody recognized that they were around. I don't know. Eventually, they felt like enough time had passed that they could come out of hiding and resume life as usual. They decided to get jobs at the First National Bank, working as messengers for the well-respected chief clerk of the bank named Perry Parker. And the chief clerk, basically, he was a teller at the bank, but he was kind of like a shift supervisor, I would say.
Gotcha.
He wasn't necessarily the manager of the entire bank. In May of 1927, Welby's grandfather's dead body was found underneath the Colorado Street Bridge in Pasadena.
That's the one with the lights all on it, right? Like the 3 clusters. I'm like 99%, right?
I feel like our stars are just aligned today because there's been several times that I've been thinking exactly what you're saying. Ooh. I was going to ask you the same thing because there is one bridge in Pasadena that's very memorable, very visible from the freeway, that's absolutely gorgeous, that everybody knows. I'm assuming that's the Colorado Street Bridge. But we may be wrong, and it would be terrible to be wrong about something so close to our hometown.
Do you want me to look real fast?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, hang on. That's the one.
So Google image search confirms that's definitely the bridge. It's very memorable.
Very creepy, too.
It is
There's
ominous. It looks like it could be haunted. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know how a bridge is haunted, but it feels like it.
There's been a ton of suicides off that bridge.
Really?
Yeah. It's been there forever.
Man.
This is 1927.
Yeah. So, yeah, his body, Welby's grandfather, was found underneath that really famous, really beautiful bridge in Pasadena.
A lot of Instagram pictures there.
Tons. So the day before his grandfather's death, he had withdrawn a large sum of money from the bank. It was also extremely suspicious that there were 5 different suicide notes found with him that had 2 distinct handwriting patterns, which of course made it clear that they were written by 2 different people and there was foul play.
I mean, that makes no sense, but continue.
Why? My thought is, why bother even writing a suicide note if you're going to leave 5 with 2 handwritings?
You're better leaving none.
It's idiotic, on top of just the tragedy of this. I mean, It's your own family member. There's just so much here. It's awful. Working at the bank seemed to make William feel like he could really get away with brazen financial crimes, so he got deeper into forgery. The bank's chief clerk, Perry Parker, noticed that at least $400 in bad checks had been forged recently, which would be almost $6,000 today. So Perry decided to call in a tip to the police to report the stolen and forged checks. And he said that he suspected William was behind it. William was arrested and sent to trial, where Perry testified against him and asked the judge to sentence him to jail time instead of probation. He was convicted and received prison time for the charges, but after serving only a few months, he was paroled.
It's pretty crazy. Just like points the finger right at him and just, I don't even want him to get probation. Send his ass to jail.
Yeah.
It's intense.
I mean, I guess maybe they are unable to catch so many people, and when he finally could catch someone, he's like, throw the book at him, you know?
Or maybe he just really had put a lot of trust in him and felt so betrayed.
That's true. Yeah, that makes sense. At this point, William moved back home with his mom in Kansas City, where he got a job at a movie theater. But it wasn't long before he was fired because he was spending all of his shifts watching movies instead of working.
Understandable.
I mean, he would just go into the theater and sit down while he's supposed to be popping popcorn. But again, he really is kind of obsessed with Hollywood and movies.
It comes back again and again to movies.
Over and over. At this point, he was unemployed, broke, and of course, freshly out of prison. So he decided to do a few armed robberies so he could steal enough money to get back on his feet. He held up a few stores and took whatever he could get out of the store clerks. And these holdups usually only earned him about $100. But this today would be about $1,400. So not bad, but also just, again, very much desperation.
Scraping by.
Yeah. And I wonder how often this happened to store clerks because of the era and, you know, being around the Depression. People just wanted to steal everything because they didn't have money.
I imagine they all have guns under the counter.
Right?
Yeah.
Sounds pretty dangerous
It's
to be a store
old-timey.
clerk. In October 1927, William stole a car and drove it to Chicago, where he was accused of strangling a girl. A few weeks later, he drove to Pennsylvania, where he robbed a gas station and shot the gas station attendant. In November 1927, he stole a gray coupe from a local doctor named Mr. Mance and then drove back to LA, where he robbed a drugstore for $30. On Thanksgiving, he met a couple in San Diego, and then he gave them a ride back to LA. The trio decided to rob a pharmacy on the way, and he reportedly requested chloroform from the clerk during the holdup. Afterwards, he told the couple that he had picked up that he had plans for a kidnapping and ransom job.
I mean, all these burglaries or robberies, holdups, he's getting probably just gas money. Because like all these old-timey cases, they just drive cross country like it's nothing. Kansas City, Chicago, San Diego, LA, you know, like all over the place.
Yeah, it does seem like when I think about the inflation and looking at, you know, getting $1,500, it seems like a lot. But if you're going cross country, it's not that much money.
No.
You know, it just won't last you very long. If you have to stay somewhere, get yourself food and gas, I mean, how far are you going to get? So, but at the same time, he can't really stay in one place because he's committing all these crimes and burning the spot. So he's got to be on the run.
It's another check on the list of the old-timey.
Absolutely.
Just constantly moving, especially 20s Dust Bowl stuff. Just moving constantly, stealing cars, Bonnie and Clyde, running.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Always moving.
Yeah.
And jailhouse murders. Those dudes too. Just constantly moving. You're on the run.
So by this point, William had decided that kidnapping would be the best way to get a larger sum of money because ransom was basically a bigger payoff than these smaller crimes that he was committing.
I mean, does he know someone that's doing this and getting away with it and it's a good idea?
Well, that's the thing. It had to come from somewhere.
Well, maybe a movie.
Movies, local news cases, or national news cases or whatnot. There's got to be something that planted this seed for him because he didn't just come up with this on his own, you know?
Yeah, it just doesn't. This does not make, you were a genius. Like you were so good in school, all this, you get the job at the bank and now you're just like, I'm going to hold people for ransom. It's interesting.
It's a crazy turn. And this wasn't a long period of time. I mean, we're talking about the matter
like 3 years
for the whole thing. Yeah. So at this point, we're only like a year in. I mean, this is a crazy escalation.
To go from losing a competition in school because you're so smart to I'm going to hold people for ransom now because I'm back from San Diego.
Within 12 months.
Right? That's huge.
Once he made the decision that he was going to do this kidnapping, he immediately knew that his target should be Perry Parker, William's former boss at the bank, who had turned him in and sent him to prison. Obviously, his choice of targets was for revenge, not just money, since Perry didn't really have that high of a position at the bank that earned him a lot of money. And it's worth pointing out that I also read one source that said that William wasn't really motivated by revenge and he only knew Perry had daughters from the fact that they had visited the bank, which is why he ended up choosing Perry as a target. But pretty much everywhere else and my own logic kind of tell me that he had to be motivated by a little bit more than that. I believe that it was just revenge.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know. There's a couple different theories out there, but for us, I think it makes more sense that Perry was picked on purpose,
Yeah, especially because Perry's, obviously already caught him once. So like Perry's going to catch on if it's just money related. He catches on when money goes missing. So it's revenge.
Absolutely. It just is the only thing that makes sense to me.
Hey, how many people are you expecting?
Relax, it's an open invite.
I think you're a few seats short.
Yeah, like 14 seats.
You should enter your eligible New York lottery draw game tickets with Collect and Win. You could win a $5,000 gift card to use at the Home Depot and buy a bigger table to host.
Hopefully they also sell chairs.
The Home Depot is not a sponsor of this promotion. You must be 18 years or older to purchase a lottery ticket. You must be 21 or older to purchase a quick draw ticket where alcoholic beverages are served. Please play responsibly. Entered by 1-7-20.
It's hosting season, which means it's too many people in the house season.
Can I sit on this? Nope.
Casserole burning in the oven season.
Anyone smell that? My yams!
And Aunt Meg giving advice season.
You should enter eligible New York lottery draw game tickets with Collect and Win. You could win a $5,000 gift card to use at the Home Depot to make hosting a little easier.
Wow, Aunt Meg, that's actually great advice.
The Home Depot is not a sponsor of this promotion. You must be 18 years or older to purchase a lottery ticket. You must be 21 or older to purchase a quick draw ticket where alcoholic beverages are served. Please play responsibly. Entered by 1-7-20.
So Perry Parker had a wife named Geraldine and 3 children, including twin daughters, Marion and Marjorie, who attended Mount Vernon Junior High at the Lafayette Square neighborhood of LA. Although they were twins, they were actually nothing alike. Marjorie enjoyed playing with dolls and having tea parties, but Marion preferred sports and playing football with boys. While Marjorie was more delicate and kind of girly, Marion was very athletic and outdoorsy. But although they were opposites, they actually got along extremely well, and they were very close with each other. Marion was friendly and well-behaved, but a little bit quiet and shy until she knew people. Her parents were, of course, extremely grateful that she was such an easy child because she always obeyed the rules and she stayed out of trouble. She was a really good kid. Once William had decided the Perry's daughter was his target, he staked out the Parkers' neighborhood for a few days before deciding when to strike.
It's so scary. They just have no idea this guy's stalking and watching and just lying in wait.
I always think that, how terrifying it is to look back and know that this person had premeditated and was watching you and your family. And I mean, that's awful.
Learning your schedule.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Just before the holiday break, on December 15th, 1927, William went to Mount Vernon Junior High to abduct one of the Parker children. He was dressed sharp and he confidently walked into the office of the school to attempt to convince the staff member to release one of the Parker kids to his custody. So when he came into the office at about noon, he told the woman at the front desk, named Mary Holt, that there'd been a terrible car accident and Perry Parker had been hurt severely. And he gave her the story that Perry was requesting to see his daughter, basically. Mary Holt was actually, I heard, either a teacher or the vice principal, but the principal, Cora Friedman, was out of the office when William arrived. So Mary was assisting with administrative duties in the principal's absence. And normally she wouldn't be at the front desk.
Terrible coincidence.
It really, I mean, there was just like some things just align where it's the worst case scenario.
Yep.
And this is one of those situations. Mary had a reputation for being highly responsible and capable of helping whenever colleagues needed assistance. She was really, really reliable. She was thorough and by the book, so the school staff knew that they could count on her. William told her that Perry was requesting to see his, quote, younger daughter. But of course, we know this doesn't make any sense because the girls were twins. So once he sensed something was wrong, he rephrased and asked for, quote, the smaller one.
So bizarre.
It raises red flags right away. I mean, it's very odd, right?
Yeah. And if someone said to me, I need the younger twin.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Immediately, alarm bells are going off. When Mary Holt asked what Marion's sister's name was so that she didn't get the wrong twin, he didn't even know that she had a sister. He told Mary that his name was Mr. Cooper, and he actually encouraged her to call the bank to verify what he was saying was true. So basically, she could get peace of mind that the car accident story was truthful.
And she doesn't want to call it, be a bitch, basically, right? And just be like, well, you're lying. Let me call and verify, when he's just so adamant. So, go ahead and call. Go ahead. And it's like, okay, well, you wouldn't put yourself out there like that if you were lying, right? But that's what he's banking on. It's just insane.
Absolutely. Because William delivered the lies so confidently and he was just insistent that she could confirm the story with the bank, she believed him and never called to check. She released 12-year-old Marion to his custody, saying, quote, I never would have let Marion go, but for the apparent sincerity and disarming manner of the man.
I kept reading the word suave to describe him as well. Very suave, just silver tongue.
Yep.
He could just walk in and talk you out of, all of everything you have.
Yeah, over and over again, it just seems like everybody recalls that everything seemed normal with him. And there is some elements to this case that I kept thinking, although I hate saying his name, I feel like he's Voldemort, but it reminded me of Ted Bundy. Like, he's also just kind of the average everyman.
Yes.
Where he could easily kind of not stand out. He looked like everybody. Exactly.
Yeah.
So he was charming, looked very average, just kind of fit in. He wasn't very memorable enough, to be like, oh, that was a crazy guy that was stealing the kids. I mean, he just didn't have that air about him. So it really does remind me of Bundy in that respect. Unfortunately. Yeah. I hate saying his name. I don't want to conjure him up. Once William got Marion into his car and away from the school, he told her that she had been kidnapped and was being held for ransom. He asked her if she could stay quiet on her own because if not, he'd have to cover her mouth and eyes and then tie her hands together. So she assured him that she wouldn't give him any trouble, Then they drove around all afternoon talking about films and movie stars. That night, the pair of them even went to the Rialto Theater in Alhambra to see a movie called Figures Don't Lie. And although I haven't seen the movie La La Land, from what I understand, the Rialto is the theater featured in that movie.
Well,
it's pretty famous.
We should see it together because I never saw it either.
Yeah, I missed it.
I
didn't really miss much, I think.
Native Angelinos right here. Just talking
Don't
about
care.
What we don't know. What bridge is that again? Huh? What movie about our city?
Meanwhile, Principal Cora Friedman had returned to the office at this point and was informed of Perry Parker's car accident. She didn't really think anything of it at the time and actually didn't ask any further questions.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, so a parent got in a car accident. Got it.
Yeah, bad things happen every day.
Next.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. It's another one of those things where looking back, this is a point where someone could have taken action, although I don't blame them because it's like, well, things happen all the time. And in an era where you can't really verify people's stories through cell phones and very instant communication, it seems like it just seemed normal for someone to come and pick up a child.
Yeah.
And just trust their word. But the big issue was that nobody told Marion's twin sister Marjorie about the accident, or even that her sister had been picked up from school. She had no idea any of this was going on. Marjorie didn't know why Marion didn't show up to take the bus home with her like they usually did. So she waited for a little bit, but eventually she just left because she didn't want to miss yet another bus. When Marjorie arrived home, the Parkers assumed that Marion was just staying late. You know, maybe she was helping to clean up after the class's Christmas party because this was right at the beginning of the winter break. Or she was just playing. It's had to be something normal.
Yeah.
Especially since she was so well behaved, they just didn't suspect anything was wrong. And they thought it was a simple explanation and she'd just be home a short time later on a different bus. When a couple hours passed and she didn't arrive home, the Parkers called the school. Mary Holt answered the phone at Mount Vernon Junior High. And right when Perry said his name, she abruptly asked how he was feeling after the accident. She seemed, shaken that he was calling into the school.
He's had a miraculous recovery.
Right. This is what? You're on the phone. It freaked her out. Perry was, of course, alarmed by her question. He had no idea what was going on. And he informed Mary that he hadn't even left the house that day, because he'd stay at home with his wife to celebrate his birthday. After Mary told him that Marion had been picked up from school, Perry hung up and the Parkers decided it was time to call the police. But just as they were about to make the call, their doorbell rang because they had a telegram sent from Pasadena. It read, quote, "Do positively nothing till you receive a special delivery letter with the next instructions." And it was actually signed by Marion. A short while later, another telegram arrived from Alhambra that read, quote, "Miriam secure. Use good judgment. Interference with my plans dangerous." But this time, the letter was signed George Fox. And right away, this sends off like alarm bells for me, right? Because a telegram has to be manually input by a human being.
Yes, I've been waiting for this. I just what the fuck is going on? How are we allowing this telegram to even come through? Who is this person? And this is to me like when we blame 911 dispatchers now, right? Like, how are you supposed to know? But they're typing it out. And you know that you know what? They might not know that the kid's missing at this point.
Maybe, but just reading that says enough to me that something is wrong and this person's a criminal.
Yeah,
nobody doing legitimate business talks like this.
I'm sitting there and I just go, "Hey, Larry, do me a favor. Read this telegram that I just had to type out. Should I be concerned?"
Right.
And maybe Larry's like, nah, you're fine. Okay, cool. So you send it. But what?
And the thing is that's striking is we'll see that there's just so many telegrams he's sending. And this is the first alarming one. But it's clear that all over the city, he was sending a ton of telegrams through a ton of telegraphers. What are they called? Telegraph clerks. So many people must have seen him. So many people must have been there inputting these messages that were aware that this was, a really bad situation, that someone was in danger, and nothing was reported. I didn't see any information about like, oh, this telegraph operator, gave a report of his description or anything, which seems so odd to me.
Yeah. Why aren't they interviewing them?
And I wonder, are they just on autopilot where it's just like, oh, whatever, it's just words to me, just tapping out their Morse code or I don't know.
Not remember. Oh my God. So, when you see old timey things and there's the one person trapped in the booth, the glass booth doing the tickets, and they're just in there and you look at them and you're like, that's like a tube size practically, right? You just lock them in for a couple hours. Maybe they're just in this little tiny space to just knocking out telegrams. And if you don't knock out as many, you're fired.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm assuming.
And you just pass it through. You just pass it through.
It's totally, like I said, it's autopilot.
Yeah.
It's just kind of,
just handing out tickets.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Main Street USA Disneyland. Just, that ticket booth. Just hand them out.
Right. So once it became clear that Marion had actually been kidnapped, Marjorie told her parents that while they were walking to school that morning, a man in a gray coupe had followed them. It's so tragic because, of course, looking back, she's like, oh, wait, this was weird. A ton of things happen in our daily life that we just kind of pass off like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I think Marjorie's probably going to have the worst time.
Yeah, just she has to have a ton of survivor's guilt because
all of it.
On top of just the normal sibling stuff and her being there next to her sister walking to school. I mean, they're twins.
Yeah.
Which is just this extra layer of connection. The next morning, the Parkers decided that they had to call police. While the police were at their home taking a report of the incident, another letter arrived. It read, quote, PM Parker, use good judgment. You are the loser. Do this. Secure 75 $20 gold certificates, U.S. currency, $1,500 at once. Keep them on your person. Go about your daily business as usual. Leave out police and detectives. Make no public notice. Keep this affair private. Make no search. Fulfilling these terms with the transfer of currency will secure the return of the girl. Failure to comply with these requests means no one will ever see the girl again except the angels in heaven. The affair must end one way or the other within 3 days, 72 hours. You will receive further notice, but the terms remain the same. And it was signed Fate Fox.
He sounds smart, but it's also just commands. Just do this, bring this. You can't really get a grasp on this person yet, except for the Fate Fox at the end, right?
It also strikes me that he's just so wordy. Like,
yeah.
He may be smart, but not even necessarily that. Just like really, I don't know, verbose and like kind of annoying. I mean, I feel bad even saying that because obviously he's a murderer. He's evil. He's not annoying. But it's like he's just so over the top,
If you're a profiler reading it, right, you're going to try to think of like the personality. And it's definitely like verbose and big words but it's just like somebody telling you just commands what to do, commands. And it's like hard. You can't really get a grasp necessarily.
Yeah, it's very, I think, ego fueled to me.
Yes.
He needs to be the smartest person in the room.
Sly,
needs
like
to
a fox.
best people. Exactly. So it's the first in a string of examples of just not only is he evil, but he's just an obnoxious fucking asshole on top of it. There's just so many ways that he, I don't know, could have had a little better judgment here. Like,
if only he'd won the competition.
That's what it all comes back to.
All of it.
This particular letter also included a note from Marion that said, quote, "Dear Daddy and Mother, I wish I could come home. I think I'll die if I have to be like this much longer. Won't someone tell me why this has to happen to me? Daddy, please do what this man tells you, or he'll kill me if you don't. Marion Parker."
That's fucked up.
It's awful. And again, it's just, I think he's just getting off on this power. These people are scared and desperate, and, he's getting the better of them. And that's like part of it. It's an element for him that gives him satisfaction.
Well, they might not take him seriously.
Yeah, maybe. After receiving the telegraphs, the police agreed with the Parkers that they would just keep the press out of it to ensure that the kidnapper would believe that Perry was following their directions. So Perry withdrew the money, and he kept a written record of the serial numbers so that later detectives could track them, which is really smart. I don't know if the police instructed him to, but, obviously this is like something that could end up catching the person.
That's a banker. That's somebody who has experience in like fraud and like knows kind of how they track that stuff.
Yeah, he's like, this isn't my first day. I wasn't born yesterday.
No. And he might not be like an investigator at the bank, but he knows what the protocol is.
Absolutely. The Parkers didn't tell anyone but police to ensure that everyone around acted normal and nothing suspicious could happen that would threaten Marion's safety. The only person the police spoke to was Mary Holt, who'd given a description of the man that picked up Marion. Mary said that he was clean-shaven with wavy brown hair and appeared to be about 5'8" and 150 pounds. He looked to be approximately 25 to 30 years old, and he was wearing a dark gray hat with a gray herringbone coat.
Love old-timey clothes.
Absolutely. And he was doing that on purpose to look more legitimate, That was probably like his nicest outfit, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
It's also striking to me that at this point, he's 19, 20?
Yeah.
And she's estimating he's older than that. He looks like he's been through some things.
Again and again, you're right. I didn't even realize that.
Although detectives couldn't really tell Mary much about what was going on, she, of course, feared the worst, and she blamed herself for Marion's fate. Mary, like we said, had always been just so vigilant, and the fact that she had let her guard down this one time was just devastating for her. She was so distraught that she had to be sedated, and although the Parker family assured her that they didn't blame her for the mistake, she ended up quitting her job a short time later. And Mary really never recovered from this whole ordeal, and she'd eventually actually die in an asylum.
You want to talk about a turning point?
Absolutely.
Where the thing you can set, like, okay, this person's life just from there on. That's the issue. That's the problem. Like, poor Mary.
I know, she was just never the same. It ruined her life. It's terrible. We always talk about the additional victims in these crimes. There's so many other people that it affects, not just the victim that ends up losing their life. I mean, this is a prime example of that. It's just tragic. William called Perry at about 8 p.m. on December 16th, the day after Marion was taken.
Like, now it's phone calls.
Right.
Nuts.
But again, it's like we've seen in these other letter cases where they need to like pester the family, they need to really just instill this terror in them.
It's like, just don't forget about me. I'm right here. Don't forget. Don't you forget.
As if that was even possible. It's the only thing that they're thinking about. It's taking over their lives. On the phone call, he said, quote, "Mr. Parker, do you have the money?" And Perry responded, yes. And William said, "I'll call you back in 5 minutes," and then hung up. 30 minutes later, he called back and set up a meeting at 10th Street and Gramercy Place. Perry did not inform the cops that the kidnapper had called or that he was going to the meetup, but it seems the officers must have been staking out his house. He didn't notice that officers were following him when he left home. But when William arrived with Miriam in the car for the handoff, he, of course, noticed that there were police circling around the meetup spot. So he sped off and fled the scene. Perry was there at the meeting spot, just waiting in his car until almost midnight. But, of course, the kidnapper never showed up. So he eventually just went home. Before the bungled meetup, William and Marion had actually been getting along peacefully. Marion was complying with William and just obeying all of his directions to keep herself safe. And in return, William was not harming her or restraining her severely.
He even mentions, he says, she looked at it almost as like an adventure. Like, what are we going to do today? And I'll go back home eventually, so might as well just enjoy this. Which is kind of, that's a little girl that's pretty like sure of herself.
It seems to me like, in my opinion, they just have a skewed perception. I think he's just saying that in my mind. But I think there was an element to her just being well behaved and knowing that if she just gets through it and listens to him, she'll be safe. So there's part of me that just doesn't believe that they were like all buddy, but who knows, maybe they were, but there's part of me that's just, I'm so mad at him that I'm like, yeah, it wasn't like that, dude. I mean, she was terrified. She was just doing what you said and probably being nice to you because she knew her life depended on it. She knew her safety depended on it. So they may have had some sort of positive interactions, but from my perspective, it's all fear-based for her,
Yeah, and I do think that she thought she was going to go home. Like, they were going to meet up. It was going to be fine. My dad's going to bring the money. It's all good.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't. And I really do. I think the element of she's a well-behaved girl, all this, it's a different time. Respect your elders, all this. She might not have a relationship, but she knows this guy, sort of, right?
Yeah, she's seen him.
Yeah, and he's a good talker. So who knows what the fuck he's told her. But I just, oh, God.
Yeah, it does make sense. It seems like, from all accounts, she was pretty calm.
She was being babysat.
She was going around with him while he was sending all these telegraphs.
Yes.
They went to the movies. Nobody that they had passed by had reported, oh, there's a girl screaming in a car or there's a girl that's being restrained at a movie theater. I mean, she was really complying. And I think that you're right. I mean, I think she truly believed that she was going to go home.
Yeah.
That this was just something she had to get through. It was going to be a little bit of time and it was going to be awful, but she would go back home.
Yeah.
But the thing was, once this, handoff was canceled and the whole meetup was botched, she realized she'd not be going home that night and she became inconsolable. And this was a turning point for her, then she started kind of battling him. She was distraught. And he became stressed out by it, of course, because it's, she was very compliant before and all of a sudden she's freaking out. So his tension definitely rose at that point.
It's hosting season, which means it's too many people in the house season.
Can I sit on this? Nope.
Casserole burning in the oven season.
Anyone smell that?
My yams! And Aunt Meg giving advice season.
You should enter eligible New York Lottery draw game tickets with Collect and Win. You could win a $5,000 gift card to use at the Home Depot to make hosting a little easier.
Wow, Aunt Meg, that's actually great advice.
The Home Depot is not a sponsor of this promotion. You must be 18 years or older to purchase a lottery ticket. You must be 21 or older to purchase a quick draw ticket where alcoholic beverages are served. Please play responsibly. Entered by 1-7-20.
It's hosting season, which means it's too many people in the house season.
Can I sit on this? Nope.
Casserole burning in the oven season.
Anyone smell that?
My yams! And Aunt Meg giving advice season.
You should enter eligible New York Lottery draw game tickets with Collect and Win. You could win a $5,000 gift card to use at the Home Depot to make hosting a little easier.
Wow, Aunt Meg, that's actually great advice.
The Home Depot is not a sponsor of this promotion. You must be 18 years or older to purchase a lottery ticket. You must be 21 or older to purchase a quick drop ticket where alcoholic beverages are served. Please play responsibly. Ended by 1/7/20.
By the following day, the story broke that Marion had been kidnapped, and it spread through the press. It was front page. A letter arrived after the botched meetup that read,
PM Parker, when I asked you over the phone to give me your word of honor as a Christian and honest businessman, not to try and trap or tip the police, you didn't answer. Why? Because those 2 police cars carefully followed your car. I knew and you knew. What for? Mr. Parker, I am ashamed of you. You'll never know how disappointed your daughter was. She was so eager to know that it would be only a short while before she would be free from my terrible torture, and then you messed up the whole damn affair. How can the newspapers get all this family and private pictures unless you gave them to them? All this continues after you received my strict warnings. Today is the last day. I mean Saturday, December 17th, 1927. I have cut the time to 2 days, and only one more time will I phone you. If by 8 p.m. today you have not received my call, then hold a quiet funeral service at your cemetery without the body on Sunday the 18th. When I call, I will tell you where to go and how to go. So if you go, don't have your friends following. Pray to God for forgiveness and for your mistake last night. If you don't come in this good, clean, honest way and be square with me, that's all. Fate, Fox.
he is horrific.
He's so irritating.
And again, let's point out, there is someone that is typing this in Morse code into a telegraph. So
Yeah.
there's someone that is reading this. That's, I mean,
This
how
is
the
the
fuck
one.
is
Yeah.
he not stopped on his way out of the little, telegraph operating store?
Excuse me. Excuse me, sir. Like tap, tap, tap on your shoulder, right?
What the fuck? I mean, this is awful.
Yeah.
So along with this Fate Fox letter came another note from Marion that read, "Daddy, please don't bring anyone with you today. I'm sorry for what happened last night. We drove right by the house and I cried all the time last night. If you don't meet us this morning, you'll never see me again. Love to all, Marion Parker. P.S. Please, Daddy, I want to come home this morning. This is your last chance. Be sure and come by yourself or you won't see me again. Marion."
That was super important to him. Like, do not bring police.
Mm-hmm.
This time you come alone and let me drive this home.
The Parkers pleaded with the police to let Perry go to the meetup without being followed. And surprisingly, the detectives actually agreed. I feel like this is a very rare thing because normally it's like once they're involved, they're like, we're taking over everything. We may give you an extra 100 feet, but we're still going to be there.
I think they probably lied to him.
Yeah, I didn't think of that.
It's
I feel like
pretty
such
easy.
a baby angel. Like I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Well,
They
at least to him, they agreed.
Sure, Perry. Whatever you want, buddy. We understand. You got this letter. Your daughter's pleading. We understand. But no, they're absolutely in normal clothes, standing on the corner. Somebody's reading the paper. Somebody's shining their shoe, and they're all
Just
within 10
whistling.
feet. Yeah. One's just walking by with a bowler hat.
Yeah.
Typical old-timey gangs of New York, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel
Like the
very
dude over there
naive.
that's just leaning against the wall holding a baguette. He's a police officer. And the other one over there who's just like reading the paper but looking a little over each time and a little over
the
each time.
baguette's actually binoculars.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly it. Pulls out a Johnny Switchblade, right?
So more letters arrived throughout this day. The first one read,
PM Parker, please recover your senses. I want your money rather than to kill your child, but so far you have given me no other alternative. Of course you just want your child, but you'll never get her by notifying police and causing all of this publicity. I feel, however, that you have started the search before you have received my warning, so I am not blaming you for the bad beginning. Be sensible and use good judgment. You can't deal with a mastermind like a common crook or kidnapper. Fox Fate.
I mean, again and again, I'll say it. I mean, these letters are all about ego. we see this over and over in these letter cases that we've been covering. People want publicity. They want to be famous. They want to control people. And yeah, he just wants to be smarter. He wants to be the best. He wants to be the smartest person in the room.
He's a troll. He's like the original sides of, beginning the trolls. Like he's just in a chat room talking shit behind his computer, but he's never going to say anything to your face, right?
Yeah.
That's what this feels like.
He's a keyboard cowboy.
I was trying to think. I'm like,
Morse
keyboard
code
jockey?
cowboy.
I'm like, jockey, knight? What the hell are they saying?
Yeah.
Keyboard cowboy. I like that.
The other thing that's striking to me about this particular telegraph is that he's basically acknowledging that what we know is true, that before the first letter arrived saying not to involve the police, he'd already called the police. And it seems like he's giving him a little wiggle room here where he's like, I think you started the search before my warning, so I'm not blaming you for what happened in the beginning, which is a weird thing to point out, but it seems like he's perceiving that's what must have happened. And he's right, So he's like, okay, the first one was fucked up. I'm not going to give you one strike and you're out. I'm going to give you another chance, but don't fuck it up. But still, again, it's controlling, it's egotistical, and, he's just torturing them.
He's just giving them such sound advice. Be sensible and use good judgment. Like, fuck you, dude. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, that happens over and over again in almost every letter that he sends is be sensible, be smart, I'm smarter than you, but try and keep up, basically. So another telegram arrived that said,
Fox is my name. Very sly, Set no traps. I'll watch for them. Get this straight. Remember, your daughter's life hangs by a thread, and I have a Gillette ready and able to handle the situation. Fate Fox. That is another one. Like, at this point, you're helping the police. You're letting these telegrams go by. And you're calling the police and going, hey, listen, they got a fucking straight razor to this girl's throat.
Yeah, I mean, it's just alarming. And over again, he's sending them letters. It's, harassing them. It's terrifying them. I mean, yeah, this is definitely the police should be involved. I mean, it's scary because he knows his daughter's life is in danger. They become more and more threatening, it seems, as the time goes on. Another letter was also placed into a fire alarm box, and then the alarm was set off so that the note could be discovered and given to Perry. And this particular letter, again, escalated the threats by saying that he was going to kill Marion's sister Marjorie next. The next telegram that arrived read,
I will be 2 billion times as cautious and clever, as deadly from now on. You have brought this on yourself, and you deserve it and worse. A man who betrays his love for his own daughter is a second Judas, many times more wicked than the worst modern criminal. If you want aid against me, ask God, not man.
He's also kind of minimizing his own criminal stuff, right? I mean, this seems like he's like, you're way worse than me. I'm a mastermind. I'm a criminal. He's trying to plant these seeds, but he's also saying, but also you're a Judas.
No, I say I didn't want to do this. You made me do this.
Yeah, it's your fault.
Yeah.
It's not my fault. I'm smart. I'm a sensible person. You're the one that's not being smart and sensible, and you're not following directions.
Yeah.
Just blaming him.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, William called the Parker house and said, if you mess this up, she will die. Sometime during that day, when the numerous letters were arriving, William killed Marion Parker. And we know at the very beginning of the day, she had sent one of the letters, or at least her name was on one of the letters. So it must have happened sometime in the morning. William claimed later that he didn't intend to kill Marion, but because she had recognized him as a former employee of her father, and the case was getting just so much news coverage, he knew he couldn't let her live. William had taken her to his apartment at the Bellevue Arms, where he tied her to a chair in the kitchen, blindfolded her, and then strangled her with a dish towel. He moved her to the bathtub, but when she seemed to be regaining consciousness, he slit her throat. He believed that she may have still been alive when he began to dismember and disembowel her with a large knife. In the middle of dismembering her, he actually got hungry, so he briefly took a break to have a snack. I mean, that's just truly evil. It's disgusting. His original plan was to dispose of the body, but when he started to think about it, he decided that Perry wouldn't pay unless he saw his daughter was still alive.
I am not sure whether or not he really was going to kill her all along. I think he wasn't. It's so hard because he had already, he's dabbled. So it's not like this is, breaking the fourth wall for him or something,
Right. This wasn't the particular turning point.
No.
No.
But I wonder, if something happened between the two of them. I don't know whether she, quote unquote, recognized him. She knew who he was all along, I think. Maybe it was I'm not staying quiet anymore. I'm trying to actively escape, right? Maybe she's trying to get out. Who knows what it was, but Perry wants to see her alive to pay the money. Like, it doesn't, like, he has this realization after the fact, which makes me think, like, maybe this was not intended. And he just had to shut her the fuck up, tied her to a chair and ended it. He didn't necessarily try to kill her either because he just strangled, knock her out sort of thing. It just, because of the fact that he backtracks and realizes, oh shit, I shouldn't have killed her. I don't know that it was a plan like that.
Yeah, I'm unsure whether to believe him.
It could be,
either.
but
like, there's part of me that thinks it's in his best interest to just get the money.
Yes.
And then you don't have a murder charge hanging over your head. This person that gets their daughter back. You just escape. You just run away, drive across country again with a larger sum of money.
Yeah.
But it just, I don't know. Then there's the other part of me that's like, well, he's already committed multiple, violent crimes, shootouts, and murders. Because 2 people at least are dead by this point. He'd also reportedly strangled a girl. He's perfectly capable of it, but also, was it really what he was going into it thinking? I don't necessarily know.
I don't think so, because the amount of work he has created for himself after, I don't foresee anybody thinking that this was the plan.
And he also really doesn't want to get caught. He's also previously laid low for a little while, so he wants to evade police. It doesn't make sense that he'd put himself out there and, endanger himself. He's an egotistical narcissist. Like, he doesn't want to go to jail. So this would escalate the crime to where someone's going to come after him. It really would be best for him if he let her live and just went away.
I could see this guy too, just thinking in his head, well, I'll just take the money. If I just give her back, it's fine. I'll get away with it. Perry's chill. You know what I mean? He's got his daughter back. He should be so happy. So, I don't know that he intended to kill her. They went to the movies the night before. That way, when she goes back to her family, she can tell them what a nice guy he was to her and don't sentence him to a long thing, right? I treated her so good. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Just give me this money and never talk to me again. He might think that is reasonable.
Yeah, I'm really torn on it because I can see both sides. Both things make sense to me. He's an evil person. He's violent. It makes sense that he's like, let me just get rid of her because she's not a real person to him. And then the other part of me is like, his main motivation every single time has been money.
Yeah.
Usually his crimes are not, I'm going to kill someone just to kill them. He's killing people because it's a means to an end, which is getting money. So I don't know. I'm definitely kind of torn on this, but I could see both sides making a lot of sense. So when he thought about the fact that Perry really had to see his daughter was alive in order to hand off the money, he came up with this plan to use towels and rags and just random cloth to absorb the blood and give Marion's body a shape, which would enable him to basically prop her torso up in the seat and make it appear that she was still alive. To ensure that Perry would believe his daughter was still unharmed, William put makeup on her face, and then he decided to sew her eyes open. And I read two different things, that either it was thread or actually wire that he used to keep her eyes open.
I read the same. One was the thread thing was saying that he sewed her eyelids to her eyebrows. And that you could see the thread within her eyebrows. But then there's also, most things say held open with wire, and which to me immediately invokes this Clockwork Orange visual, right? So which makes me think that it's probably really sewn.
Yeah.
You know?
That does make sense.
So anyway.
Oh man, I feel really bad whenever I bring something personal up because I feel like I shouldn't talk about myself. This is about the victim and it's not about me. But I actually have had experience where I've had stitches in my eyelids. And reading this about her eyes it's a visceral experience for me. It was very traumatic.
Yeah.
Because no, on my
I'm grossed out already. Like
terrible,
I can't imagine.
Right? My second surgery, it was second or third, they had to keep my eye closed because they went in through like underneath the like eyebrow bone socket, right? And they had sewed my eyes closed while I was under during surgery. And it's not soft thread. I mean, it's like pokey, thick fishing wire, right? And when I was in the hospital recovering from the surgery, for days I was telling the nurses there's something in my eye, and they didn't believe me. And I finally got out of bed. I asked my mom for a pair of tweezers, and I pulled out 2 stitches from my eye. And I held them in my hand. They were like blue, like thick. Oh, they were pokey. It was painful. It was fucked up. And I showed them to the nurse, and I got, a little bit, let me see your manager kind of tone with her because
okay,
I was
Karen.
so pissed about it. It was awful. It was fucking horrific. And then when I got home, there were a couple more stitches still in there in my eyes.
Now, you don't like talking about yourself. My favorite thing to do is to talk about myself. You have just reminded me of something I completely forgot. Seizures. I have very horrific short-term memory loss. I just remembered the one time I had seizure, hit my face over my eye right here. They sewed it up in the ER. And I remember about a week later, I kept feeling something like hard still. And so I did the same thing, and I thought it was an eyebrow hair or something, and I pulled and it was a stitch. And I completely forgot about that entire experience until just now.
At least it was up a little bit higher.
Yeah, it was
into
like,
your
because
eye.
I split my brow bone like right below, right there.
Oh.
And
At least,
my God.
I mean, not that having that experience is lucky at all, but you're fucking lucky it wasn't inside your eyelids because I could feel it scraping onto my eyeballs.
I can't.
I'm sorry. I
That's
feel
wild.
bad for going on a personal tangent
What
in
else
the
is
middle
new?
of talking about Marion but it's just, it really is visceral when you know what this feels like. I mean, I could just picture this poor little girl just sitting there, oh man, it just breaks my heart and it turns my stomach.
This is so much work for him too. It's just crazy to me.
There's so much length he's going to make it appear that she's alive. But again, this points to him needing to have the money. It's really about maintaining this image so that he could get the payday. That's it. So that evening on December 17th, William coordinated a second meetup at 7:30 on the corner of West 5th Street and South Manhattan Place. He instructed Perry to hand the money to a man in a parked Ford Roadster. As agreed, Perry Parker went to the meetup alone and brought the $1,500 ransom to meet his daughter's kidnapper. When William saw Perry, He pulled a bandana over his face, then took out a shotgun and aimed it at him through the car window.
Perry has to know who he is still, right?
You know, I had heard he could identify his voice once they were at this particular meetup.
Okay.
But he was trying to disguise himself on the phone, and he didn't really recognize him. Again, this comes back to what I was saying about Ted Bundy. He's really looks like every other person. He's the basic bitch of dudes, you know? So I don't think he identified him by looks, but when he was talking, he says that he knew it was a familiar voice. At this point, Perry reached out and handed a bag of money to William through the window. As Perry handed the money over, he could see his 12-year-old daughter Marion just sitting upright in the front passenger seat of the car and staring straight ahead. And his thought that was maybe she had been sedated by her kidnapper, or possibly she was just so terrified that she felt like she needed to keep completely still to avoid being harmed.
Makes sense.
And again, this is the era of chloroform.
Yes.
We know that he was looking for chloroform. So Perry thought that it was something like that. And that's why she was keeping so still. From Perry's view, he could see Marion was covered up to her neck in what appeared to be a large jacket or blankets. And to me, that doesn't set off too many alarm bells just because we know it's the middle of winter and they're outside, right, in the middle of the night. Well, not that late, but, you know, late enough to be cold for Los Angelinos.
There's no seat warmers.
Right. So after the money was exchanged, William kind of peeled out and came to a stop at the end of the block about 200 feet away. He then opened the car door and shoved Marion out of the car onto the side of the road. As William fled the scene, Perry sprinted over and picked Marion up and held her. He looked at her face and, of course, noticed that her eyes were just staring blankly forward. And something felt off to him. So he opened up the blanket that was wrapped around her to find that the lower half of her body was severed below her belly button, and her arms were cut off at the elbows. At this point, Marion had been dead for about 12 hours. So Perry began just screaming in the street, and people began pouring out of their homes to see what was going on. When a distraught Perry returned home and told the rest of the family that Marion had passed away, he decided not to tell her brother and sister the details of what had happened to Marion.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, it was just too horrific for them. The medical examiner found that she was wearing makeup to make her appear alive, and again, her eyes had been sewn open. She had a 2-inch cut on her shoulder, and her torso had been disemboweled and stuffed with towels, rags, and old clothes. Inside one of the towels was part of the shell of a hazelnut, which seemed most likely to have, of course, accidentally ended up inside that towel. He found no traces of drugs in her system, and the Parker family feared that she may have been alive when she was dismembered. A short while later, the getaway car was recovered downtown. And the parking attendant said that the driver had claimed he would come back to get the car the next day. The parking attendant's description matched the one given at the school by Mary Holt. But again, it wasn't such a unique description, you know, basic build, brown hair. That's it, you know.
Everyone in my family.
I mean, really, it would appear to be everybody, you know. The following day, Marion's arms and legs were found in Elysian Park, wrapped in newspaper.
Home of Dodger Stadium.
Yes. Only an hour later, 2 hikers found the last missing portion of Marion's body, which was basically from just above her hip bones down to her knees. A $100,000 reward was offered for the murderer's apprehension, including donations from Jack Warner of Warner Brothers and the actress Clara Bow, who had, of course, been following the story closely since it was local and front page news. And today, this would be about $1.5 million.
It's a lot.
It was
and
huge.
This grew so quickly. It started at like 50,000, and then people would just add more, and it got to like $100,000.
Yeah, I mean, really, people saw the story and just felt for the Parker family. They wanted to help in any way possible.
It's hosting season. And this hosting season, you can enter eligible New York Lottery draw game tickets with Collect and Win for a chance to win a $5,000 gift card to use at the Home Depot. So, enter today and make one of the most stressful times of the year a little easier.
The Home Depot is not a sponsor of this promotion. You must be 18 years or older to purchase a lottery ticket. You must be 21 or older to purchase a quick draw ticket where alcoholic beverages are served. Please play responsibly. Entered by 1/7/20.
It's hosting season, which means it's too many people in the house season.
Can I sit on this? Nope.
Casserole burning in the oven season.
Anyone smell that? My yams!
And Aunt Meg giving advice season.
You should enter eligible New York Lottery draw game tickets with Collect and Win. You could win a $5,000 gift card to use at the Home Depot to make hosting a little easier.
Wow, Aunt Meg, that's actually great advice.
The Home Depot is not a sponsor of this promotion. You must be 18 years or older to purchase a lottery ticket. You must be 21 or older to purchase a quick draw ticket where alcoholic beverages are served. Please play responsibly. Entered by 1/7/20.
Detectives had very little to go on, but the medical examiner had found that a shirt stuffed inside Marion's body had an imprint reading Bellevue Arms Apartments that, of course, we know came from William's apartment building. Detectives canvassed the building and they spoke to every tenant, including a young, dark-haired man that identified himself as Donald Evans. And Donald Evans allowed them to search his apartment.
Oh, gladly.
Yeah, just keeping all the normal appearances up.
Gosh, I hope you find the fiend that did this, just commiserating with them, hoping the family's good. God, I feel terrible.
And we know, these murderers get off on things like this.
Oh,
they were so close, but I'm smarter than them. And I outwitted the police, Ay, ay, ay. When the officers left, William fled the city, leaving a half-eaten breakfast behind in his empty apartment. The case was given top priority, so a couple days later, fingerprints on the letters and the getaway car resulted in a match to William Hickman, whose fingerprints, of course, were on file since he'd previously been arrested and incarcerated. So now that they knew who he was, detectives went back to the Bellevue Arms apartment, where neighbors confirmed through a photo lineup that Donald Evans was actually William Edward Hickman. So a subsequent search of the apartment resulted in the discovery of human blood, as well as a half of a hazelnut shell that perfectly matched the other piece that was found inside Marion's body.
It's crazy.
So, unbelievable.
Hazelnut.
So now that law enforcement knew the suspect's identity, they distributed wanted posters across the U.S., and law enforcement was notified to just be on high alert. It spread everywhere. They were afraid that William would flee to Mexico, so detectives emphasized the urgency down the West Coast and even got the U.S.-Mexico border actually closed by Mexico's governor to hope that he wouldn't escape the U.S. Radio and print media spread the suspect description far and wide, pleading for the public's assistance in reporting any leads that would just help catch William. A man who closely resembled William was arrested or detained 7 times in an 8-hour period.
That's rough.
I mean, people, yeah, it's awful that this happened, but people were just on high alert. Like, we got to catch this guy. You know, it could happen to any one of our daughters.
I mean, after the second time, you just stay inside.
I mean, don't leave the house. Come on.
Or you just sit in the lobby of the police station.
I'd be terrified. That would be so traumatic, just being taken in over and over and stopped. And, you know, who knows what could happen, especially in an era where, I mean, you're not safe out there. The cops are going to fuck you up.
You ask questions later.
Right.
Yeah.
There was another lookalike that was beaten by a mob so severely that he requested to be kept in jail for his own safety. So like we said, I mean, this was happening to multiple people. And this particular person was a different person, but he actually figured out, like, look, I'm safer off the street.
Yeah.
You know? The saddest thing is, though, that later on that night, he committed suicide by hanging himself. And this is one of those, you know, terrible downsides to old-timey cases. It just shows the tragedy of people taking justice into their own hands and not having due process, where people are just, you know, picking people off the street.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, detectives were working hard to track down the real killer. Although detectives could now confirm the killer's identity, they still had to find him since he'd already fled town, and he had, of course, a head start. William began stealing cars and headed north, which is, of course, the opposite direction that they thought he was going.
Yeah.
He began spending the ransom money in Washington and Oregon, so police were able to match the serial numbers from Perry's records. About a week after the murder, William was in Echo, Oregon, when he picked up two hitchhikers, a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old. Initially, I was like, oh, they're so young, but I'm like, oh, they're William's age.
Yeah.
That's his age. Yeah. He's young. A short while later, two officers recognized William's vehicle description from the flyers that they'd seen at their police station, which had information about recent sightings in the Pacific Northwest. So by this point, the cops knew he was in the area, and they were really on high alert. They noticed that the license plate on the vehicle did not match the car that he was driving. So the officers waved him down and made the driver stop. William was wearing sunglasses and said that his name was Peck, which was the last name of the owner who he had stolen the car from. So he was still trying to cover his tracks.
There are a lot of people wearing sunglasses in this period of time. Like Oakley wraparound. I mean, what? I just don't know of any other, like, 1927 sunglass case. Is that why it's so notable that he was wearing the sun? Because at this point, you only wear them, like, in the sun or to mask an identity, if they exist.
Yeah, I feel like sunglasses only existed as a disguise
That's
in old
it,
time
right?
cases. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, it does seem alarming, and that's why they pointed out, hey, he's wearing sunglasses. This guy's up to no good, you know?
Yeah, I had thought that was an interesting Courtney side note.
When the police kind of started inspecting a little bit, they noticed that he had a gun inside the car. So they asked him and his passengers to step out of the vehicle. A search of the car led to the recovery of a pistol, a shotgun, and the ransom money, which was found in the glove box. Upon this discovery, the officers asked if he was William Hickman, and he confirmed his real identity. His two young passengers were just basically catching a ride, but since the police had no idea really what their involvement was, they arrested and detained the kids along with William. While being arrested, William asked the police if they thought he'd be as famous as Leopold and Loeb, the two teens that were, you know, famous for the 1924 kidnapping and murder. So again, these letter murderers always motivated by narcissism, fame, ego. He's no exception.
They always want to know if other people think that they're going to be famous.
Mm-hmm.
They always want to know what other people think. And especially like police, oh, well, you have experience. You probably dealt with a killer. Am I the worst? Do you think I'm going to be famous? Like they just like, they want like their murder dick sucked. I don't know how else to put this, but like they just, they just get off on it.
And it also, these letter killers give themselves the names like,
yes.
Oh, front page, I'm going to be called the Fox. So yeah, they're trying to be, that sly character and give themselves this moniker.
They always try to control the narrative.
100%. Yeah. The Oregon detectives began questioning William, who was hysterically laughing when asked if he murdered Marion.
It's a good sign, always.
Oh, he's just a monster. After being questioned for a bit, William confessed to Marion's murder, saying that she was strangled with a wire. But right after confessing, he backtracked, saying that he had an accomplice named Andrew Kramer, who he claimed had actually been the one to murder and dismember Marion. He went on and on. He was just crying to police about this Andrew story, but they didn't believe him, so they decided to look into it. It turned out that he actually did have a friend by the name of Andrew Kramer, but Andrew was actually in jail when the kidnapping and murder had taken place. And he'd actually been behind bars since August, which is well before William was even back in Los Angeles.
He's lucky he was in prison because,
especially
he's a real person.
In old-timey cases
yes.
where it's, ask questions later, I think he would have been in danger, right?
Absolutely.
When blaming Andrew didn't work, he changed his tactics, telling police he needed the ransom money for college tuition to become a minister.
Oh, well then let's just take these cuffs off and you can just walk out of here, sir.
What a piece of shit. What did he think was going to happen? But again, he's trying to buy himself sympathy. He's just, it's everybody's fault. He has no responsibility.
Yeah.
William even went as far as to cry about how Marion, quote, was like a sister to me. We were good friends.
That's gross. Sorry. That's just, you don't kill your good friends.
Right.
I mean, okay, everyone, please don't say this. Like,
exactly.
You're wrong if you're saying this.
Plus, you're not a grown-ass adult being friends with 12-year-olds.
Side note, there's that.
Unless you're Drake. There's that. He made many comments about people's perception of him and seemed to have an obsession with being famous. He wrote a letter to the media in which he never apologized or even said that he felt bad for what he had done. But instead, he warned people not to get involved in a life of crime.
Again, just telling people what to do.
Yeah, he wants to be in charge, be controlling, and take no responsibility.
He wants to be the smartest one in the room. I know everything. Listen to me. I'll tell you how to handle all this.
Yeah, if you want a life coach, I'm here to tell you crime doesn't pay.
Right?
Yeah. He also reportedly asked people for tips on, quote, how to act crazy. And I couldn't help but think that today this would be in his Google search history and it would be able to be confirmed. But all we have is word of mouth on this one.
This guy would have been all over Reddit.
Yeah.
For sure. Just put, what does everyone think about this? Right?
During the extradition process, William finally confessed and confirmed that he had acted alone. In his confession, he also admitted to murdering a pharmacist during a robbery and multiple other armed robberies that he'd committed. William entered a not guilty plea, and his defense team attempted to prove insanity. And at this time in California, the insanity plea was a relatively new thing. And William was one of the first defendants to use an insanity plea. This was right at the beginning. Leading up to the trial, he attempted suicide twice. But normally I would take this very seriously. And in this case, because it's William, there is some suspicion that he may have just been attempting to prove his legal insanity so that he could avoid the death penalty.
I agree.
And, I would never usually say that about anyone's suicide attempt, but there were a lot of people that were close to him that were like, yeah, he's really just putting on an act.
Yes, he is.
A doctor was brought in to evaluate William and determine that he was, in fact, sane. But he also noted that he had said some disturbing things about his sex life. William had revealed that he had only began masturbating a couple years prior, but he had lost his virginity at 13 with a 12-year-old girl. He also said, quote, "I don't have any use for whores. Whenever I see a whore, I feel like choking her."
Why is he so mad?
Incel.
Something, right? And there's a lot there. A lot of Elliot Rodgers going on here.
Yeah. The trial began on January 25th, 1928, on the 8th floor of the Hall of Justice in downtown LA. And right from the beginning, of course, it was chaos. There were crowds that showed up hoping to get seats inside the courtroom, and they'd become irate because the judge, Carlos Hardy, began giving reserved seats away to his politician friends or his wife's friends, instead of letting the public just be in the courtroom.
I don't know what it is about this. Like, I can almost understand his cronies, his friends, right? But you can't let your wife's friends just come in here and take seats. Like, you're going to get shit talked, dude. For real. You know that there's like a little bit of a leniency for your homies, your friends in the office, right? But your wife's friends. It's like Ramona and Sonia showing up. Right?
I think people were just mad that like the powerful, privileged people were able to have the kind of opportunities that they didn't or whatever.
Well, they wanted to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have court TV.
But also, this is just normal for the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, everyone's corrupt. Everyone's connected, Yeah,
it's not a big deal. But God, what a bad look.
But you also exactly can't do it so publicly that people know that it's so apparent that you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You have to be a little bit, down low about it.
A little.
Throughout the trial, there were numerous tense moments where riots nearly erupted in the courthouse. So hundreds of people showed up every day for the trial, and the newspapers were all covering it with daily explosive headlines like, Hickman must hang, and of course referring to him as the Fox. From the beginning, his defense tried to prove his insanity, and William claimed that a higher purpose, which he called divine providence, had influenced him to kill Marion. And divine providence was apparently this entity that appeared in front of him in a blue haze wearing an all-white suit.
Whatever.
Yeah, you brought up that it was like very heavy religious imagery because that seems like God in all white. But it is notable that he was wearing a suit instead of robes. But to him, I think this was his like made up spiritual guide.
It's a mishmash.
Yeah, I don't believe it's anything, but he chose it from religion,
Just because, the phrase.
Right. Even having a loose connection to religion or something that people could identify with the white glow was something that maybe to him seemed more logical or explainable. Like people will relate to this because they're religious. This
Religiosity
imagery,
is a thing. The insanity plea is not, right? At this point,
exactly.
Right? But religiosity would be a great explanation of why you're acting crazy.
It gives his story credibility, I'm sure, in his mind. His mother, Eva, took the stand to help with his case and claimed that, quote, insanity ran in the family. She explained that 5 years before William's birth, she had spent 2 months in a mental facility in Little Rock, Arkansas. At the time, she was admitted at the request of her then husband, William Thomas Hickman, because he was afraid that she'd kill herself as a result of her depression. One of my thoughts here was that it might have been postpartum because she was having so many kids. I'm not sure.
That is very real possibility. Now, I know that, obviously if someone is a danger to themselves or others, you can put them in. But this is old-timey. And old-timey, you can just say she's a hysterical woman, lock her up for 6 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think now we have a lot more protocol and awareness about mental health, so it makes sense that we'll be like, hey, if someone's a danger to themselves or others, you have to, report it, or, there's a responsibility there to help them and keep people safe, right? But back then, it seems very out of the ordinary, but also very regular. Like, oh, she's hysterical, she's got a problem, lock her up.
Not only that, but he deserts the family like 5 years later.
Yeah, he's not that invested.
No,
but he's
not.
Just invested enough to commit her.
Yeah. And then he would probably say later that he had tried all along and he tried so hard and he was trying to support her and then he just couldn't take it anymore and he just had to leave.
And it's all her fault.
There it is. She's a hysterical woman. What am I supposed to do? She's going to kill herself.
Which is why his son, William Edward, is blaming other people,
Yeah.
It makes sense. In the press, Eva said her son wasn't capable of this kind of violence, and she insisted that he was a good boy.
They always do.
Always. Although, of course, his defense put up a fight, the evidence against William was just overwhelming. His alibi fell apart, his fingerprints were a match, and of course, he'd made multiple confessions by this point. So there was little argument for a not guilty verdict. The trial lasted only 10 days, and jurors deliberated for 43 minutes before ruling that William was sane. 2,000 people were gathered outside the courthouse when he was found guilty, and they all cheered when he was sentenced to death. When William was asked what he thought about the verdict, he replied, "The state won by a neck."
Oh, I feel so bad for you.
Ay, ay, ay.
Whatever.
He's just awful. The following week, William and his former accomplice, Welby Hunt, were tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of the pharmacist who'd been killed in the stick-up at the drugstore. One of the many drugstores, I should say.
Yeah. He probably thought he had just gotten away with shit, like scot-free, right? Welby's just like, hey, it's cool. I just never have to talk about it again.
That's true, yeah.
And then they caught this fucker, and Welby's whole life imploded, and he got life in prison too. San Quentin.
Yeah.
Done.
No additional charges were ever brought against him for stealing cars, assaulting a girl in Chicago, the shootout at the gas station attendant in Pennsylvania, or any of the other, numerous crimes that we know he committed. However violent they were, he just never, he was already sentenced to death, so why charge him? While awaiting his execution, he appealed his sentence and became a devout Catholic, at which point he reportedly wrote apology letters to all his victims' families. But again, like we pointed out, like 5 hours ago in the beginning of the episode, this all happened in the span of a very short period of time. So it was only a couple months later that he turned over his life, became religious, and started writing these letters. Because he was, from the time of the murder to his death, it was only like a year.
This guy moves fast.
Yes.
That's something that, like, from the get, you're just like, this guy's moving.
Well,
he never
also,
stops moving.
This case moved very fast.
Yes, that too. Yeah, they kind of, as soon as they got him, they decided it was over. Let's make it quick. We don't even need to, we don't need to do this. We don't need to waste our time.
Right. He decided to make an appeal to the governor, C.C. Young, for a postponement or commutation of his death sentence until his sanity could be properly determined, but this tactic didn't work either. His last meal was coffee, bread, eggs, and prunes. At 10:10 a.m. on October 19th, 1928, William was led to the San Quentin prison gallows, followed by a priest. And again, this was only 8 months after his conviction and less than a year after the murder. The crowd of 250 people was standing room only for his execution and included movie actor George O'Brien and police officer DJ Oliver, who had been the one that was shot in the stomach by William on that Christmas Eve robbery.
You know, it kind of, I feel like because this actor is in the crowd with him, right? There's this moment where he probably sits back and just goes, George Oliver, nice.
Yeah, I made it.
Right? It's like Christmas Vacation when he's like, you must jump that thing like 10 yards. He's like, 10 yards, right? He's so proud of himself. It's just like, holy shit, he made it. Like, wow, I'm somebody.
This is what he wanted.
This
And
is exactly
he wanted
what he
people to
wanted.
know him and people that he respected and movie stars he was obsessed with. So it makes sense.
I
He's
was
made
really
it.
surprised that Clara Bow wasn't there,
Yeah.
as far as we know.
Yeah.
Bizarre to me. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, because reportedly, Clara was Marion's favorite actress, and it's one of the reasons she donated. And she wrote a letter to the family because she was just so connected. Like, not only is this a big story in the news, but I'm personally connected to this little girl who loved my work, you know?
Yeah.
So it seems odd that she didn't show up, you know? William's last words were, "Christ have mercy on us," before the black hood was placed on his head. The doors below opened, and William began to collapse, which shortened the distance he fell, which meant his neck didn't break during the fall. So he hung for several minutes, shaking and twisting in front of the crowd before he eventually died. The prison's doctor waited a few minutes, then climbed up and checked for a heartbeat using his stethoscope. After confirming his heart had indeed stopped, the doctor declared William's death by shouting "deceased" to the crowd. And that's the story of William Edward Hickman and Marion Parker.
Interesting to me is from here, all these different folk singers are inspired by this death, by this case, by the tragedy. And there are at least two, I think there's really like 3 different versions of a song, The Ballad of Marion Parker. So go to YouTube. We've got the link in the notes. It is the most sad, drab, old-timey phonograph music you've ever heard. It is absolutely playing in that corner from Main Street to Frontierland where you make the left. It's something you'd hear there, for sure.
But it matches just like the heavy-hearted feeling that I get going through this case. I mean, oh man, it's just awful that, again, these letter killers put these families through so much and terrorize the communities, make people fear for their lives. I mean, that's the point, is to control people's feelings, control the narrative, feel better than people, and know that they can scare people because they're a, quote, criminal mastermind, you know?
It's a psychological warfare.
Absolutely.
And honestly, when you read this music and you read the lyrics and then you listen to it, the first thing I thought was, this is something Elliott Smith should have covered. It's just right up his alley.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been a great version, too, because the song is creepy. And when you listen, you're like, oh, this is terrible. But put it in the brain where you're like, oh, who could cover this? Could be a really creepy good song.
And even not knowing the story, it still sounds very heavy and tragic and just, weighs you down. But once you know the story, it just takes it to the next level where you're just, oh man, it breaks your heart.
Lana Del Rey. You could even bring it to the current and do a Billie Eilish, although that would be just a beeping noise, right?
Courtney's in the middle of a pitch meeting right now.
I am. Give me a call. Columbia, whoever.
If you work for a record company.
Capitol Records, I think, is right down the street from Bellevue Arms. Might even be on the same street.
Yeah, I mean, it's very just a tragic song, a very intense murder ballad.
I've got this on the list of places for me to go visit as well.
Right. Yeah, if we get those pictures, we'll let you know what the area looks like today.
I'm currently holding on to Ninja Prowler shots that we need to post. Just for anyone that listens to Patreon, get excited about this. I went. So we need to go to Bellevue Arms and also want to go to Manhattan and Gramercy or whatever it was. Because this is all 20 minutes, 25 minutes from us.
And it's just so long ago. I mean, it's, approaching 100 years ago. So
oh my God, you're right.
The whole place looks entirely different. Initially, when I was going through the story, I was like, oh, sidewalk, road, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, nope, it's just dirt. There's no sidewalk. There's no road.
I Google mapped. I did a bunch of Google maps just to see what it is right now. And it's just city.
Right.
Just concrete jungle. And the courthouse, I believe it's the one, the big city hall courthouse. That's going to be the same.
Yeah.
But that's it.
That's the only one because everything else has been so developed by now. But it's a completely different place than this basic small town that the crimes originally were committed in. It was such a small little community. Alhambra, Pasadena. I mean, these aren't big places in the 20s. Yeah. So that's the very last letter for letter L murder that we're going to cover.
These were interesting.
We got all the way through letters until I realized we haven't covered a ransom case.
Yeah.
So this one was just like, oh, we have to do a ransom one because that's, of course, an aspect. And, ransom note writers are so controlling and all these things. I mean, but they fall right in line with that ego and fame seeking of all letter writers. They're the same, but they're like maybe the side of the coin instead of the other side, It
is very strange.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it for this case. Before we get out of here, we want to say thank you again to the people that joined our Patreon this week, Tatiana, Christy, and Zoe.
Thanks,
you guys. And if you want to get access to ad-free episodes, early release, and a bunch of bonus episodes, then go to patreon.com/murderdictionary, or you can click on the link in our show notes, along with our resources, our thread list for merch, and our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I think we've been on long enough. This is like a 7-hour case now at this point, so let's get out of here.
Let's.
Yep. So we'll see you next time. Have a great week, and thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye. We all have songs that remind us of our first love, and bands that make us think of a certain friend. Maybe you have a workout playlist or a favorite album to listen to on road trips. But do you ever wonder what was going on in the lives of the artist when they wrote the music that you connect to your own memories? Rockumentary Podcast fills in the blanks on what you may not know about the iconic artists making the music that's so meaningful to our own lives. Each episode is an in-depth biography spanning from a musician's childhood through all the challenges of their journey to success and how they handled finally achieving fame. On Rockumentary, you'll hear about Kurt Cobain becoming a janitor at the same high school that he dropped out of, or how Jimi Hendrix was kidnapped and held for ransom for 2 days. Our episodes include details about Notorious B.I.G. marrying Faith Evans after knowing her for only a week, and Phil Spector pulling a gun on the Ramones when they tried to end a long recording session. You may know the music, but on Rockumentary, you'll hear the stories behind the songs. Search for Rockumentary on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you like to listen to podcasts.
You're a small business. You work hard, but you don't have a huge marketing budget, and you're always looking for new ways to find customers. Have you ever thought about audio? You're listening to an ad right now, aren't you? Introducing AudioGo, a new online platform that lets you run ads on the top podcast and digital radio stations. Don't have a radio ad? We'll make one for you. Sign up for free today at audiogo.com. AudioGo, audio advertising made simple.
It's hosting season. And this hosting season, you can enter eligible New York Lottery draw game tickets with Collect and Win for a chance to win a $5,000 gift card to use at the Home Depot. So, enter today and make one of the most stressful times of the year a little easier.
The Home Depot is not a sponsor of this promotion. You must be 18 years or older to purchase a lottery ticket. You must be 21 or older to purchase a quick draw ticket where alcoholic beverages are served. Please play responsibly. Entered by 1/7/20.